So the topic of my presentation. So what we are discussing, why do we need it, and how do we get it in Nepal? So that's main part of the discussion. So I would like to start because we are talking about green. So we want to see why we need green, because if you look the global ambient level of particles 2.5 in 2018, we can see almost the whole Asia. It is red. That means it's higher than WHO standards, and that brings a lot of concern. That brings a lot of health and other issues. If you see the rest of the world, particularly in Europe, it's green. It's completely green. That's like below 10. So that's what we want to dream. We want to have a fresh air, clean air. If not for us, the generation behind us, they should have everywhere green. That's why we see hydrogen as a future energy sources, where we can see the entire globe green in this picture. If you say, what we have a dream. That's a dream of my generation, to have everything in this picture green. That's why we call green hydrogen can be one of the sources. And why we are having like that, this is the background. Because today's discussion, the main aim for us is to have a motivations. We need to understand some background, if not the technical one, at least the social part of it. So if you look in the picture, the GDP per person, we have in Asia, Singapore, Bahrain, Australia, they have quite a high GDP compared to South Asian countries, Bangladesh, Nepal, India, Pakistan. So we are neighbors, good neighbors, and so many things are common. We have very less GDP, and we have very high particulate emissions. So that is a really big challenge for our part of the world, and producing bad energy. So we produce quite a high emissions compared to the bigger countries or developed countries, and that is the reason we need to change the way we use energy, so that our GDP can rise and our emission can fall down. And this has brought quite a hazard in Asia. If you look, the reason behind the deaths or mortalities, the ambient particulate matter and household air pollution is quite high. So it reflects on our mortality. It reflects on our health system, and it also reflects on our climate. If you see the trends of global warming, from the studies done, we may expect almost 6 degrees rise in temperature in Himalayan region. So if 6-degree temperature are rising in Himalayan, we will have not a single drop of snow on our caps, and that will stop all our rivers flowing, and that will stop all our ecosystem. Of course, it will not happen. There has been a lot of movements. There has been a lot of political science and other initiatives that will not let this happen. But still, if nothing is done, 6 degrees rise in temperature, just because of the greenhouse gases and other effects that human beings are producing, and particularly by the use of fossil fuels. But we have some scenarios. This is a very short-term studies done by NASA. If you look from March to April into 2019, exactly same period, and this is the emission levels, the molecular matters above Indian subcontinent. And if you look, just because of the COVID, none of the vehicles were out. We can see within the same period, within the 1 month time, it has significantly declined. Of course, we see some pockets because we have a coal-fired electricity generating plants in this area. So that is even producing electricity. But if you see the Delhi, if you see Dhaka, if you see Lahore, everything is close towards blue or green. So that means if you can control the greenhouse gas emissions, if you can control particulate emissions, control things, then that will certainly improve the environment. And the COVID has given a very strong background. It has given a very strong correlation between things. So then on that background, so many clean air measures in Asia have been proposed, and this has been released from UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, for us. And if you see, these are the recommendations to clean our air, to control our environment. And there are so many things. Clean cooking, of course, Nepal is working on that. Industrial processes. Most of the emissions are from the post-combustion controls. For example, the brick chimneys and other combustion things. And particularly if you see the emission standards for road vehicles, that means if we control the emissions coming from the road vehicles, that will have a very, very high impact. And that is possible. In Nepal, as of now, we can count the number of electric vehicles, that is 5 or 10, less than 50 on the roads. So if we change these patterns, the way we use the road vehicles and produce emissions, that could have a very big impact on the environment, and of course reflects on climate change and other things. And studies have shown, if we follow those clean environmental impacts, if you see under the current scenario, the policies that the countries are following in this region, this will be the emission patterns on 2030. But if the clean environment measures are legislated, if you see the difference, that's quite high. The study shows 80% of emissions can be controlled, and most of them are from the electricity that is produced from coal firing plants and emissions from the road vehicles. So that has given us a kind of motivations that we need to change the ways we use energy. We need to change the way we use the fossil fuels. And this has a very big impact on environment. If you see the current trends of the emissions, we are expecting to have 3.5 degrees rise in temperature by 2100, the global rise in temperature. But if you control the emission patterns, if you control the greenhouse gas, for example, if you choose this path to 2 degrees Celsius, then by 2080s we need to have net zero emissions. Then the overall temperature rise can be kept under 2 degrees Celsius. There are also the pathways to keep the global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And all these patterns of the climate change or control over the climate change has been related with the energy patterns that we use. So many studies has been done. It is needed. It is necessary. It forecasts if COVID does not impact, it's not, then the GDP is expected to rise quite sharp. And that means the purchasing capacity of each human being will increase. That means the amount of money we can use for purchasing energy could be higher than what we use right now. And that additional money for purchasing high quality energy for protecting environment is possible because GDP is rising up. If you can buy high value clothes, we can buy high value fuels as well. And there has been studies to see how this can be achieved. If we want to control temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius by 2100 degrees Celsius, this would be the energy mix. It's clear. Now we have less than 6% of the total energy is renewables, but that has to change. It should be almost low carbon, and renewables should contribute over 80% of total global energy by 2100. If that is the direction, if that is the way, that is the path that the entire world is following, Nepal and the neighboring countries around it cannot remain behind. We have to follow this. We have to do this, and somewhere we need to start. And that's why we call green hydrogen can take up a big share on these renewables. So let me enter in the second part. Where do we find green hydrogen and contributing towards the low carbon society? Hydrogen is an energy carrier. In fact, this process was found by Williams Group in 1838. It's quite an old technology. It's not a rocket science at all. It's a very, very old and forgotten technology. What we do is we just break water into a hydrogen and oxygen ions by applying electricity. So that's half part of the reaction, what we call as the electrolysis. And we carry the hydrogen and put it back into the fuel cell, where it mixes with oxygen and produces back water. So it's just like breaking water into hydrogen and producing water by combining with oxygen. So breaking water needs electricity, and producing water will produce electricity. So hydrogen is basically storing the electrical energy in quite a very dense form. So this is just a chemical reaction. So it's all behind the chemical reaction. But the challenges are, how do we produce it in the efficient way? How do we store it in the efficient way? That has been our recent challenge, but it's an old technology. As of now, it's of course solar energy that produces hydrogen. It can be directly produced from heat by thermolysis, hydrogen, and mostly from the mechanical energy by heat, or by directly fluid energy by hydraulic machines. We produce electricity, and electricity can be produced from solar panels, and we do electrolysis. We can produce hydrogen. Hydrogen can be produced from biomass, and then by pyrolysis and other methods, and hydrogen can be produced. It can be also produced from photosynthesis, and there are several pathways. I think for Nepal, the hydrogen production through electricity, maybe from solar or from hydropower, can be a sustainable path. There are a lot of technical aspects, though it has been developed a long time ago. So this is a kind of a block diagram. I don't want to bring you in the technical aspects. So there are so many steps. We need to produce electricity first. Then we need to break water into hydrogen and oxygen. We need to store it. We need to transfer it. We need to put it back again into the fuel cells and then produce electricity again. So that's a very complicated processes, which has overall efficiency issues. The total average efficiency for the whole cycle is not more than 60%. There are so many research that has been conducting, and the aim is to cross 80% efficiency. But the argument is, if fossil fuel can run with 30% efficiency, why not hydrogen can run with 60% efficiency? Storage is another problem. We need 300 bars. That's extremely high pressure. 300 bars, it's not a common pressure. So that's a challenge, how to store in that high pressure. It's very light, it leaks, it is inflammable. We have safety issues. It has a lot of cost parameters around it, and the technology is it's not completely mature. So it's under process, and the main problem is adaptability. Can we change our mindset from fossil fuels, what we call as even dirty, it's easy fuel, to a clean fuel, complicated and challenging fuel? And maybe that's how the maturity of the society and adaptability of this technology come hand by hand in future. That's what we can expect. But if we see the operational ranges, why we can use the hydrogen, because if you see the energy density, it's comparable to the nuclear fuels. It has very, very, very high energy density, almost 400 times a high density than normal fossil fuel, 4,000 times dense than normal battery. So that means 1 kilogram of hydrogen can give the same power from the energy stored in 400 kilograms of battery. And that's a huge thing when we compare to the vehicles, because to carry a battery is to consume more power. That's why we think in the future, small cars and small vehicles will still be battery-based electric vehicles. But for the big buses, for the intracity cars, for the trains, where the battery cannot drive it because of the low density of energy, there is a very distinct gap where hydrogen can fuel it because of this high energy density. We just need few kilograms, 10 or 20 kilograms hydrogen can drive from Kathmandu to, for example, Pokhara. That's quite high energy density. So that is the range where lots of researches has been conducted, and that is where we can also be focused in Nepal. A lot of energy is consumed by city buses, trucks, and maybe in the future trains as well. If you see the market right now in 2020, we have a very, very classical market for hydrogen. It's just a feedstock. That means the industry producing fertilizers, the industry producing some chemicals, something only that. So only the small scale or the industrial scale hydrogen is a demand for this, but it is changing. Lots of new industrial sector is coming up. For example, power generation. Transportation will be the largest consumer of hydrogen. Right now, it's almost zero, but now in future, transportation will have a very big sector of hydrogen. And we also have the industrial energy coming from hydrogen. We're also having the building energy coming from hydrogen. And almost the industrial scale, that is the urea production and chemical processing plant, it remains same. So a lot of new things will happen. And if we start to bring hydrogen in context of Nepal as well, all these things will start in Nepal as well. We will have a new ecosystem of transportation. We will have a new ecosystem for power generation and buffing. So that's a future. Entire world is moving towards hydrogen with the different shift of society. And this year is a very significant for hydrogen. We call it 2020, the horizon, because from this year, the energy of or the cost of hydrogen from the renewable is entering into the cost of hydrogen produced from the fossil fuels. So until now, the hydrogen, the cheapest hydrogen produced from the renewable energy is still expensive from the fossil fuels. But from 2020 and 21, it will start to come inside and slowly even fall down. By year 2040, the hydrogen produced from the renewable energy will be cheaper than the fossil fuels. And that is why we need 10 or 20 years gap. We still have some time to prepare our society, because hydropower will remain for next 200 years, for example. So if hydrogen becomes comparable and cheaper than fossil fuels, definitely this will change the transportation sector. Definitely this will change the industrial sector. Then we need to start to prepare from now in order to adopt this energy in future. That's why we call this is the right time to discuss. This is the right time to start. So if you look the development of hydropower, Nepal, like it has the story has changed within the last 5 years, where we used to have 18 years of load shedding. Now we have surplus energy, and moreover that 24,000 megawatts are under some stages of development, and almost 7,000 megawatts are on the pipeline. We expect these projects to be completed by 2030, if late 2035. So if National Grid has more than 7,000 megawatts in 2030, we will have lots of energy surplus. So many discussions how to handle the surplus energy, but good that we have the surplus energy. That is the motivation. And the recent data from Investment Board shows that by the year 2030, the maximum power demand, including all the new energy sources, converting all the household into electric cooking system, converting 30% of vehicles into electric vehicles, all the government measures to create demand will saturate only 10,000 megawatts. But the power production, if we go in the high-speed mode, it will be 18 gigawatt. So we can clearly see the projections. These are the studies. It shows we will be having 8 gigawatts of surplus energy by the year 2030 than what we need. And that's what we want to utilize. And that will be too late if you start thinking to utilize this energy in 2028, for example. We need to start to think from now how to do that. And of course, the best example given is to export. There are so many things. MCC is in the parliament, and there are so many good numbers. It says we can have 3 billion USD per year in 2030 if we are able to sell all the surplus electricity to India, for example. But there are so many issues. What happens if transmission lines are not there? What happens if you don't have a quality and reliability in power? What happens when the transmission lines get failed? What happens if the political issues rise up? What happens when the money to do the land acquisitions is not available? So many uncertainties, but still hope is there that Nepal can export electricity, surplus power, and produce revenues. A good one way of thinking. But there are other ways to do that. And what happens when we start to export the electricity to India? There is another study what says right now we have, this is the petroleum products is quite low. But once we start to generate revenues by selling electricity from 2030, $3 billion per year, there is a boom. Look at the rise in the petroleum products, and that is not sustainable development. We sell electricity and we buy fossil fuels, and it is exponential growth. Why? Because we will be importing lots of vehicles, lots of cars, lots of roads that goes to wide corners of Nepal, and we need more fossil fuels to drive those cars and vehicles. More import from India, and we have trucks that drives the imported items from Calcutta port to Kathmandu and rest of the world. So that means becoming rich in future, Nepal will have even high dependency on fossil fuels. And if you see where the transport, if you look at the transport sector, it's diesel. So we will be having high diesel consumption in future, and also coal. And if you look at the energy consumption pattern for 2030, we will be having 7% diesel, and when we become rich, we will be having 18% diesel. Of course, we will be having the electricity will be changing from 3% to 32% because cooking stoves and electric vehicles will be there. But that is quite disappointing for us to have like almost 3 times growth of diesel from 7% to 18% from poor Nepal to rich Nepal. So we find diesel is a commodity where it cannot be replaced. We can replace petrols by electric vehicles, battery based, but diesels are kind of the bad carbons footprinted in Nepal. And if you don't do anything right now, this will not let us be in the sustainable development, because we need to depend on other countries for 18% of total energy we consume coming from diesel alone. And if you look to the current scenario, this is the most productive power in Nepal, Khimti hydropower plant. And it was so surprising. This gives us 10 gigawatt of electricity to NEA every year. It's a rich power plant. It can give up because it produces more than what it has to be done in PPA. But look at the small power plant. Thank you. So if you look to the other side, the small projects, the 5 megawatt and 10 megawatt projects, they are not able to lift power to the grid because they cannot synchronize, because the electricity is 11 kVA volt is not supporting their systems. Then they are called as the sick projects. So if all the small 1 megawatt to 5 megawatt projects are classified as a sick project, and they are not giving the revenues, their share is getting down to 50, and the big project has to give 10 gigawatts electricity free to NEA, then that's not a very good story for the hydropower investors. And there is one issue. If we start to produce hydrogen from the excess energy, if we start to produce hydrogen from the sick projects, I think that will be a sustainable method, and that is what we call the future directions. It was from yesterday's news in Setapati. I'm thankful to Professor Gola who shared this to me. Already it's happening. People are quite innovative in Nepal. We have a very good business mind. So the biogas produced from the municipal wastes and other wastes are being converted into gases and bottled in the cylinder like this, and it's a commercial value. If the entrepreneur in Nepal can establish a commercial biogas center where they are competing with the LPG. Now this can be alternative to LPG fuels. Maybe in future, the same companies can divert their businesses and produce hydrogen from hydropower, surplus energy. Even Khimti is giving 10 gigawatt free to NEA. Small power projects cannot grid connected, and their electricity is almost free for now. So if we can use those electricity and produce hydrogen, bottle them like this, sell it in the market, maybe the fossil fuel trucks can be converted into fuel cell trucks in future. We know that even Tata Motors have started to investigate on hydrogen trucks. I don't want it in future. The Tata trucks coming to Nepal from India and hydrogen pipeline for the fuel to the fuel cells. So before that happens, we need to at least try to create our own fuel that can replace fossil fuel in the future. And examples are there. And there are, of course, the end use are challenging. We can use this in transport, maybe very less for manufacturing, but this will have a very good impact on the electricity system. This can be a buffer when there is a spill energy surplus production, and NEA is expecting 400 megawatt surplus energy in monsoon period next year. 400 megawatts extra electricity for 3 months, and that could be used for hydrogen production in future. It can be used for hospitals, schools, hotels, which needs dedicated electricity, continuous electricity supply. We can replace fossil fuel based electricity generator from hydrogen based, fuel cell based generator for hospitals, for schools, for hotels, and that has a big impact. Industrial processings. Nepali government had 11 Arabs that as an incentive just for urea fertilizer coming from India. And if you can produce urea in Nepal in future as an industrial process, it will consume big amount of electricity, and it will also be the all consumer for hydrogen, because urea needs hydrogen. Urea is a hydrogen intensive industry. Maybe in future we can dream of exporting hydrogen to nearby country, to Bangladesh, for example. Bangladesh is an electric hunger country. The project in Karnali, for example, and transmission line up to Bangladesh can be replaced by a dedicated hydrogen production unit in Karnali itself, bottling it in a safe vessel, transporting it by water, like Bola sir said earlier. Nepali ship driven by hydrogen, carrying hydrogen to Bangladesh, and hydrogen can produce electricity back in Bangladesh for their industries. So we don't need transmission lines. In one of the news, I saw our Prime Minister saying in Nepali, "Bijulilai dokomalai jane ho, MCC चाहिन्छ." Okay, we need MCC. We don't say we don't need MCC, but yes, dokoma bijuli ल्याउन सकिन्छ, and that doko is safety vessels and electricity is hydrogen. So we have alternatives to transmission lines, that is carrying electricity through hydrogen. So concluding this is, as I said, this is just some technical part. We think this should be a roadmap. We should start from the feasibility study. We should have assessment of technical, financial, environment, and market. And market is more important for us. That's why School of Management is our partner today to find out what can be done. The presentation after me can be on that issues. So hydropower and other renewable. So we need to start from somewhere: feasibility study, cost benefit analysis, social impact, environmental impacts, all. We need to have a capacity development. I think at present, me, Bola sir, and few of us know what we are talking about. We are trying to motivate others, reach far and wide, try to push people to make them understand what they can. But that will not help. We need capacity. We need research facilities. We need expertise in the local universities, so we can do the research and development, and we can also contribute to the knowledge management. Of course, we are not ready to do the fundamental research, but technology transfer and local adaptation, that is our path. And to support that path, there should be the capacity in the university coming to the society. Then we think we need a pilot project, small or big, it doesn't matter, but that will complete all the steps from production to bottling to safety to transfer to retailing, all those smaller things, and create complete business ecosystem, because this is a new commodity. It's a completely new thing. We don't have a value chain from production, storage, supply, retails, end use, and we need to push towards the national policy. We may need direct foreign investments to establish the big power plants, fertilizer industries. So it has a big impact. What we are talking is not on the small perspective. It has a bigger and long-term impact to the country. So this is how we think we should proceed forward. And I would like to end with some reflections. We think this COVID has changed our psychology in a way. So today we are having the webinar. We have not done it earlier, but we think we have changed. It looks quite common to us. So this is, and we think this COVID phenomenon, pandemic, has given us a clear mandate to take off the footprints, the carbon footprint from the energy we use at present. If we don't use energy from the, we don't eliminate the carbon footprints, COVID and the pandemic like COVID will keep on coming in several names, several forms, but it will keep on coming. So we need to remove the carbon footprints. The rest of the world is coming towards the hydrogen. If you look to the newspaper, I suggest you can search. Germany is investing $300 billion on hydrogen. Japan already has one model hydrogen society where only and only hydrogen is used for each and everything they use, from cooking to heating to transport. Everything is supplied from the hydrogen, and that they call hydrogen society. Australia, it aims to be the world's largest exporter of hydrogen in the world in future, because they have big deserts and they have a good solar radiations. And Europe is coming up as a new market for hydrogen. Even Norway has started to use hydrogen trucks to carry the goods in their thing. So world is moving towards hydrogen, but for us, we cannot remain behind. We cannot stick to fossil fuel. We cannot stick to the dirty fuel that is giving us less GDP and producing more emissions. The technology is maturing. It has matured to some point. For our part, the technology transfer and local adaptation is the start. Of course, in future, we want to contribute to the fundamental research. At now, we need the most challenge is not the technology, because it is kind of mature, but to establish the supply chain for the locally generated hydrogen and to generate revenue. Like Dean School of Management said, if you keep on producing and producing, you will be bankrupt. You need to generate revenue, but how? So that is where I want to stop. So that is where I think School of Management can contribute, and that is where this discussion can lead towards. Each of us feel this is a interest for the nation, and if we start to talk about it, discuss about it, and bring good ideas around it, I think this is possible, and that is how we get to there. So thank you very much. So I would like to stop here and then hand on